Hello, it's Clive de Carle, The Health Revolution. And there have been a few people over the years, the last decade or so, when I've been recording videos, that every time I speak to them, I learn loads. And one of them is the gentleman right here, Phil Mycams from Anti-Aging Systems. And over, I don't know how long it's been, but quite a while, Phil, many years, you've taught me lots and lots of interesting things. And so the reason I've asked you to come on this time is that you're putting on a conference at Luton Hoo, a rather wonderful, supposedly, hotel. And I know the people you've invited are, you might say, perhaps, I don't know how many there are, 8 of the world's finest health practitioners, the ones that are at the very edge of the leading science. So perhaps I can switch this over to you for a second. Who's the highlight of the lot?
Well, that's extremely kind of you to say that, Clive. And if I can teach you something, then I'm very honoured indeed, because you're a man of great knowledge as well. So thank you for that introduction. Yeah, exactly right. I mean, in a world where there's so many meetings going on, thankfully we're back to live meetings again, which I think are so important. You know, what do you want to hear? And what we're trying to do at this summit, which we're calling the Profound Health Summit, is to bring people in from around the world who are practicing the most amazing things right now. And perhaps many of the things that they're practicing right now, most people are not aware of. And that's a fundamental problem with the way that the dissemination of health and medicine today works. In fact, I'm writing a piece at the moment for our magazine, which is called Aging Matters. And I'm saying that we need artificial intelligence to read everything that's ever been published. And when we put in our problems, our issues, would cross-reference everything and come out with, you know, scientifically validated papers that would say, look at this, look at this, look at that. Because even today, there are 1 million medical, just the medical side of it, publications every year. 1 million every year. And that's on top of the 50+ million that is already in the literature. So who can read all of that? You know, nobody can. And as a result, all these discoveries, or many discoveries, they get lost, they get buried. You know, you've heard the expression, science reinvents itself every 25 years. And I think that's so true, because there are bits and pieces that have been discovered and they've either not become, certainly haven't become public knowledge, and for various other reasons haven't got into the mainstream. And so they just kind of get wasted. And I could give some examples of that. So in regards to the Profound Health Summit, which is taking place the 30th of September to the 2nd of October this year, we've got a number of people coming in giving what I think, if you've never heard these things before, are truly outstanding. I'll name one straight away. There is a slight focus on peptides. Not every lecture, and by the way, we're going to be 10 speakers now, and I'll get to that. But not every lecture is peptides, but those in the know are well aware that peptides are de rigueur. They're the in thing. The information that's flowing about peptides is truly remarkable, and I can touch on that if you want me to. Just give you one example and then fire the questions at me so that I don't dominate this thing. We have a wonderful Italian gentleman, a surgeon, and his name is Dr. Valerio De Nicola. And Valerio has worked with the University of Rome, and he has, over the last 5, 6, 7 years, they have treated over 2,000 patients. Okay, and they published on this. It's been put out in major journals. And what they've basically done is they took a range of people. These were people between the age of sort of 40 to 70s, all of whom had been told they needed a new knee or a new hip replacement. And his discovery is basically, in a nutshell, they take 10 milliliters of blood from the patient, very small amount of blood, and overnight they effectively torture your blood It's in a tube. But what the process that they have gets the blood to release a substance called heat shock proteins. When it's finished, 24 hours later, it looks like a piece of chewing gum. I've seen it, like a piece of red chewing gum. And then they take slithers of that, which is your blood, okay, our blood. And then let's say it's a knee. They then make 3mm cuts, very small. So it's almost a non-invasive surgery, but they just make the mildest cuts on very precise places on the capsule. And then they put into this, those little cuts they've made, they put in back your treated blood that's now rich in what's called heat shock proteins. Why would you do that? Well, it turns out that heat shock proteins in specific points where there are masses of stem cells on those points reinvigorate those stem cells to repair the cartilage. And the amazing thing is that within about 10 days, there is no more pain. And over a period of 3 months, the cartilage regrows. And they've done over 2,000 patients. They published on something like 400 in detail. They followed them up over a 5-year period. And at the moment, none of these patients, having originally been told their option was a new knee or a new hip, have ever had to have a new knee or a new hip. Their body has regenerated their own cartilage. So how amazing is that? And you're talking about a procedure that so might, imagine you just 10 milliliters of blood withdrawn, that's easy. And then you go back the next day, make 3mm cuts, they put this in, you're finished, you're in and out of the clinic within an hour or two, and you go and have lunch, you know?
How much do you have to spend on the device that does the separation of the blood?
Well, not very much, because the devices already exist. The devices to do this, the bit that they are keeping proprietary is the precise heating and cooling of the blood that releases the heat shock proteins. That's their work, of course. But there's no significant equipment. There's no specialized equipment that isn't in existence that's needed here. It's pretty straightforward. It's pretty straightforward. And of course, although costs are not clearly delineated at this time, if I know the trouble in England, of course, people don't know about costs. You say, oh, I've had my knee done, I've had my hip done. They don't really have any idea of what the cost of doing that operation was. And of course, the costs are great. You've got all those professional people, you're in a professional environment, equipment, insurance, drugs, goodness knows what, and all the follow-up that's going to come. You know, it's not an in and out of surgery and hi, bye, I'll never see you again, is it? So we estimate that the average cost of a knee operation and follow-up is around 30,000. Okay. And we're estimating that this procedure is about 1/10 of the cost.
So as a teaser for people who want to come to the conference, will you be able to tell people at the conference where they might be able to get it done, if not now, in the future?
Yeah, there's 2 places in Italy right now that are doing it. One in Rome and one in, I can't remember the name of the town, but it's in Umbria. So there's 2 places, and Valero and his partners are working on getting some, including, I've heard talk of one in London, but I don't know. But obviously, if you come to the conference, and the conference is designed to be intimate and personal, we all have breakfast together, we all have lunch together, we all have dinner together. So you have a very good chance to meet everybody. So hopefully one day at lunch, if that's your interest, you'll be sitting next to, you know, Dr. Di Nicola, and you'll say, oh, can I ask you a question? And because we know that's why people come to conferences, they want to network.
So if it works for knees, presumably it must work for lots of other things.
Yeah, the thing is, it's all about the publications, the evidence, the backup. He's already intimated to me that it could work on backs. I was in a very lucky position of a year or so, or maybe more now, get confused with that COVID thing we went through about where I was and when. But I was in Cyprus at a meeting with Valero, and I had the opportunity to be with him for 3 days and learnt a lot about this. And in my ignorance, you know, I'd said, well, yeah, a lot of, because the thing about let's say it's a knee. The thing about that is you're reminded of it every time you move. Ow, ow, ow. And so suddenly it's high priority. You need to do something about it ASAP. Just ongoing, it's nasty. So I did ask him, I said, so when that happens, is it bone on bone? Is that what's going on? He said, no. He said, if it was bone on bone, he said the pain would be excruciating. So I said, oh, it's just a loss of cartilage, is it? Is it? And of course, you've also got the synovial fluid that sit between, which acts like a damper and a shock absorber. And, you know, the viscosity of that also diminishes. That's where supplements like hyaluronic acid are very effective in improving the viscosity, which is very helpful, because obviously if you prevent the cartilage from rubbing, that's helpful. But what Valero explained to me was what is typical is, yes, there'll be some cartilage loss compared to a young person with an older person, but apparently one of the things that takes place is calcification. We're back to the old problem, right? That we're over calcified. And you know some of the answers to that, Clive. But apparently one of the reason that the pain can be gone in 10 days after this procedure is the first thing that happens is not a regrowth of cartilage, but a softening of the cartilage. And bang, because what happens is the nerves that are within that cartilage, when the cartilage hardens, they've kind of stretched to an unnatural position. So every time we move, ow, 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 that's the problem. So once the cartilage has reduced its calcium and has softened from around those nerves, they go back to their normal position. And now suddenly you can move around and you're not feeling pain. So that apparently is the first. So that's great, isn't it? The fact that you can have this procedure and know that within 10 days that problem's gone. So
what would interest me would if they could do an experiment using high doses of magnesium of a good type, let's say 12 capsules a day during those few days, and see if they could cut it down from 10 to 5 days.
Well, it's funny you should say this, because Valero's actually approached me and said, Phil, can we put a package together that is really going to help and support these people through this procedure? And yes, I would totally agree with you that would be on the short list, wouldn't it? The other one, and it's an article that was only fairly recently given to me by a doctor I very much admire, which is Dr. Jonathan V. Wright from Tahoma Clinic in Washington. And he writes a wonderful newsletter, which I would recommend to everybody, called the Green Medicine Newsletter. Which of course is digital, like most things are these days. And he's written an article about good old niacinamide, which is vitamin B3. It's the non-flushing version of B3. And of course, what Jonathan is so clever at doing. Oh, you've got one there. There you go. There you go. Nice to be endorsed. And so you may have read this one then, Clive, because it was in one of his fairly recent epistles. And that basically was that what he's great at doing, Jonathan, he's got a team of university students in Seattle, and they go down the libraries and they read all the old stuff. Yeah, go back to 20s, 30s, 1940s, 1950s, because as I was alluding to earlier, you know, science reinvents itself every 25 years. And people think, oh, it should be online. Less than 10% of the world's information is online. There's oodles of stuff that isn't online. So he's unearthed a work of a doctor in the 1940s whose name was Kaufman. Last name was Kaufman. Forgive me, I don't remember his first name. And he was giving patients up to 3 grams a day. Now, I'm sure some docs and nutritionists out there will think they are heroic dosages of niacinamide. Probably wouldn't give more than 500 milligram or perhaps a gram, maybe a bit more. but he was getting remarkable results. And one of those results was in joints. So, and there are other things as well. So I think we can put a package together that will really help people speed up these repairs, speed up these results, and hopefully maintain them for a very long time.
So who is the next star of the show, would you say?
Well, our VIP guest, our keynote lecturer, I suppose is the expression, is Professor Vladimir Kavinson. And
yes,
Vladimir is a very big man in every sense of the word, in that he has been the chair for the European Gerontological Society for many years. He's very well known, very well respected, leads a large team of researchers, has done for decades, since the 80s. And he and his team were the one that discovered that these short chain peptides, that's peptides that are less than 4 amino acids, so you have to be 2, 3, or 4 amino acids. They're in food groups, and we get them from different food groups, and they act as gene switches. So we helped to write a book which is called Peptides in the Epigenetic Control of Aging. And that, to me, is a big explanation of epigenetics. You know, we all know that there are vitamins in food, there are minerals in food, there are oils in food, there's fiber in food, and we all know that they do various jobs. But now we can say, from more than 40 years of research, and by the way, documented on over 1 million people, big numbers. Why were these numbers so big? Because it came out of the Soviet Union, you know, and they did things in big ways and for long periods of time. So with this in mind, we now know that certain peptides are gene switches. So now we can start to get really targeted. We can start to say, if that's our problem and it's related to that gene, we can use that peptide. And on a more basic level, we could even say we must eat those food groups because they're most likely to have those peptides. So, and vice versa, we might be able to avoid other food groups because these peptides either activate or silence genes. They're on, they're off. There's no middle ground. So, and again, when you look at the list of what that means for humans, they're quite remarkable. So they've been used in a wide range. They have been used in the Olympics. They have been used in space programs. They help people recover much, much more quickly. But there's another lady accompanying Professor Kavinson to the meeting, and her name is Professor Svetlana Trofimova, and she runs an eyesight clinic. And when you see the before and afters of using peptides, you might be flabbergasted, because we're talking about reversal of macular degeneration. We're talking about reversal of retinal pigmentosa, which, to the best of our knowledge, there is not a clinic in the world that can do it. And when you see the pictures of before and afters, they are quite remarkable. I'm thinking of one particular case. These are digital pictures, topological pictures, and they basically show, if it's green on the retina, you've got full eyesight. If it's yellow, you've got poor eyesight. If it's black, you've got no eyesight. Okay. So I remember one lady's eye, she was 90% blind in that eye. You know, virtually a black picture, firstly. By the time the treatment had finished, and I think it was over 1 to 2 years, it wasn't overnight, but over 1 to 2 years. But normally you'd expect a degeneration, right? It's just going to get worse. It's not going to get better. They reversed her to being 30% blind in that eye. So suddenly she could see stuff. Now that's an extreme example. But if we take people, they often get people coming in that have perhaps lost 20 or 30% of their vision in their eye, and they can take them back to just about normal. So, you know, quite remarkable. This is the power of peptides through genes to invigorate our own stem cells to go back and repair us. How natural is that? It's our bodies doing the job. So I think they're outstanding examples of the meeting. We have more. We have a lovely dentist, a British dentist actually, by the name of Brian Halverson. And Brian has been following the work that's been going on in Japan and also in Taiwan. And he's going to highlight, he's going to point out to us how peptides are regrowing teeth and gums and enamel and other good things. So, and root canals. So that's going to be interesting, isn't it? Because one of the problems with dentistry today, of course, is it's kind of a modern embalming, isn't it? I mean, we have a problem with the tooth. They'll drill out the root canal. They'll fill it up with chemicals you're probably not very happy about having in your mouth, and they might put what they call it, a crown over it, and it's kind of an embalming. You've got this dead tissue in our mouth, and we've just coated it. Come back and see us in a few more years, and we'll do it again. Or we're taking out the whole thing, and then we're drilling in zirconium if we're lucky, titanium if we're not lucky, into the skull, into the jaw, and sticking things on them. So wouldn't it be fantastic if once again we can tell our bodies regenerate, regrow? And it has happened in the past. There was a case many years ago of a man, I think he was in his 50s, got struck by lightning, and suddenly regrew a third set of teeth. So our bodies have the capability to do it, but obviously we have to find the instructions to help them do it. So that, I think, will also be a very interesting lecture.
What's the success rate in regrowing teeth for people?
I don't have the figures for that, unfortunately, Clive. I've left Brian alone because I know he's actually gathering a lot of stuff up and I have put my hand out and said, if you want some help putting your PowerPoint together, I'm happy to do it. So when that happens, I'll know more. Of course, it is slightly early. The amazing thing is what I described about Dr. Dick Valero. I'll call him Valero. My Italian's not that good. His research, they're doing it, right? It's not fantasy. They're doing it. They've done it on thousands of people. The work of Professor Cavenson and his team is not fantasy. They've been doing it for years. They do it on thousands of people. With this teeth regrowing thing, I think we're in, it's not pure research. It's been done. It's happening, but it's not a commercial application yet. But I think it's getting close to being, and the Americans also are doing it. They've found drugs that they put into sponges, and then they insert this sponge into the area, and they start to see the regeneration of tissues around it. And I think we've talked before about what the military do, and that they've been playing with peptides, and they are also regrowing all kinds of tissues, even fingers and thumbs. That's the weird one that we've spoken about in the past. So we might be like salamanders. We might be able to regrow. And then the next big question is, well, it'd be great to regrow a tooth that we've lost or whatever, but what about our aging hearts? Can it regenerate or aging lungs or aging, whatever it is? Can it make them younger? Can it make them more productive? I think that's the next step, the next level that we're looking forward to. So I'm excited about peptides. By the way, a lot of these uses for peptides is they can be taken orally. They don't have to be injected or used in other. They can be, of course, but the fact is that they are active orally is quite amazing, actually. And hormonal support, of course. Professor Cavenson's 2 huge trials that they did in the Soviet Union. One was over 3,000 employees were monitored for over 12 years. I mean, how often does that happen? Another trial they did was with 1,000 employees that were monitored over between 1 and 2 years. And they found that by using certain peptides, that they were able to reduce the morbidity and mortality of the people by 2/3. So in other words, if you were taking these peptides as opposed to the guys who were taking the placebos, which were some vitamin pills, you had 2/3 less risk of having a disease. And they weren't young people, so they went through to their retirements, and then they followed some of these people after their retirements, and they reduced their mortality by 2/3. Now, I do get people say, well, can we trust the studies? Do we believe them? Blah, blah, blah. So what's interesting, one of our other very prominent speakers who's coming is an American doctor by the name of Bill Lawrence. And Bill operates out of Atlanta. And what he did over 3 years ago now is he took 39 American patients and he put them on the same regime as the Russians, original Russian Soviet trials. And he did some adaptations as well. Well, that's finished now. That was over 3 years ago. And his plan was to monitor them for 3 years. And Bill will be there and he'll be talking, and he's actually calling his lecture Reversing Biological Age, which is a very powerful statement to make. So how can he make that statement? Well, what they didn't have in the Soviet times, which we have now, going back now to the 90s and today, is they didn't have easy access to telomere testing, and they didn't have easy access to DNA methylation testing, which is the so-called Horvath clock. So that's been Bill's predominant thing, where he's been measuring the telomere of his patients, the length of the telomeres, the longer the better. That's the way it basically works. Or their DNA methylation. And I know he's improved them in all his patients, And he's also come up with this concept that he refers to as the gap. Because sometimes people, let's say you're 70 years old, let's say, and you have your first measurements and they indicate that you're biologically 75. Let's just say that. So you're not happy because you're biologically older. Nobody's unhappy if they're biologically younger, but they're always peed off if they're biologically older. And then you go through the program, and then you maybe a year later, you have the tests again, and you come back and they'll say, oh, right, good news, you're biologically 68, right? And then sometimes, and I've heard this from Bill and other doctors, the patient's a bit despondent. Oh, I thought I'd do better than that. I'm 71 now, but you say I'm 68 biologically. I thought I'd do better than that. And then Bill goes back and he points out the gap, the reduction. And he said, actually, that's the most important thing, because, and he's got these formulas which basically shows that even making small changes to that has very big changes to the potential for longevity, for not having major diseases and disorders. And he just refers to it as the gap. And I jokingly say to him, well, in years to come, that formula will be called the Lawrence gap after him, because that's what always happens. Like Dr. Stephen Horvath, he looked at all these methods to test the DNA methylation, came up with his program, and now today, of course, it's known as the Horvath clock. There's so many of these things are. So he'll be presenting that data, and also what does that mean for the patients? It's all very nice to stand up on stage and say, my patients have longer telomeres and they have better DNA methylation, da-di-da. But what does that mean in the real world, right? How do they feel? How do they look? How do they perform? So he'll be there to tell us, and I hope to have some videos from patients just saying, this is how I feel now. This is what I couldn't do this, and now I can do that, And Valero too was showing us patients who have went through his cartilage procedures and talking. I have to subtitle those because they're in Italian, but yeah, this is all data. And when you tell people these kind of stories, sometimes they say to you, oh, I can't believe it. And I said, why don't you believe it? And they said, well, if it was that good, we'd be using it. And That then tells me, unfortunately, they have no real knowledge of the way the medical system works. It takes decades to bring things, and it will take perhaps even forever when those things are natural and cannot be patented. And many of these things we're talking about are in that vein. So it's a failure, and then you just have to know. Who knows this info? I mean, you can't believe that the studies done by the University of Rome that have been published in PubMed journals, the gold standard, and yet even doctors working in the field haven't seen it or heard of it. It takes money to promote things, and then who are the promoters, and why would they spend that money? So it's all within that. But hopefully at the Profound Health Summit, we can highlight some of these things to people so they can be aware of them. And if they want to travel at the moment to Italy to get their knees and hips done, it's possible, just as an example.
So, I've been so impressed with the peptides over the years that they're on my website if people are interested. You said mortality drops 2/3. I mean, that can't be forever. There must be, how do you measure that?
Well, that's for their age groups compared to the average in their age.
I see.
So in the latter studies, the patients were in their 70s. Now, bear in mind, those patients lived in Siberia, which is, tough enough by itself. They were actually oil and gas workers. So they weren't office workers in New York, right? So that was one thing. And if you know anything about people in Eastern Europe, their averages are not good. Hungary, for example, often shocks people to hear what the average age of death is in Hungary. It's very much lower than it is in the West. By decades, not by 2 or 3 years. So, so the fact that you can make people have a 2/3 less chance of dying is very, very significant, obviously. But I'm not saying, I'm not going to mention the word immortality, obviously not, it doesn't go beyond that, but it's all about leading a full and invigorating life for as long as possible.
And clearly there are peptides for kidneys and liver and all sorts of things. If I know that you would recommend not just taking one peptide, but by taking a few at a time. Are there any absolutely top hits that people, from a preventative or from whatever standpoint they should look at?
Well, in that study or studies that I mentioned there, Clive, there were 3 standouts, okay? And they were the pineal peptide, which may be the magic peptide. That may be the one that's primarily responsible for extending telomeres. I know you and I have spoken about the role of the pineal gland and melatonin. And by the way, the pineal peptide helps your pineal produce more melatonin. That's one of the consequences of it. The second one is the thymus peptide, because of its role in immunity. And the third one is the blood vessel peptide, for its role in improving blood circulation. So they were the 3 core peptides that we used in the studies that I've alluded to. Of course, there are others, and I know Bill's used quite a few. If you have a weak point, it's like it doesn't matter whether it's peptides or not. If all of us have weak points, right? It might be our kidneys, it might be our pancreas, it might be our eyesight, whatever it is. And you should focus on that, obviously, because for some reason there's an issue, whether it's genetic or otherwise. So you work on your weak points first, which is the right way for any machine. We might be the world's most complicated machines, but if you have, I don't know, if you have a motorbike and it's got a problem, you're going to focus on the problem, aren't you? You might not be polishing the engine casing, you might actually be fixing the tappets, if that's the problem. So we're the same in that respect. But I think those 3 are the standout. The retina peptide, of course, if you've got retina problems, is unreal. I had a very good experience on the adrenal peptide. I thought I had a weak adrenals at one stage. I do no longer feel I have weak adrenals. So things change over time for whatever reasons. Gets a bit complicated, I suppose. By the way, that we also have Dr. Marius Grazis coming, from Cyprus. I know you know Marius very well, Clive, a nice guy. Be nice to see Marius again. And he is going to talk about carnosine. That's CARNSOINE, not carnitine, but carnosine. And of course, when it's in an eye drop, which we call CanSee as a brand name, again, it's been Eastern European work, has shown a reversal of cataract. And there are now 2 studies, human studies, that back that up, as well as a lot of in vitro studies. So again, pretty remarkable that we can use an eye drop to, in many cases, reverse a cataract. Well, that's nice if you don't want a cataract operation. So there are lots of possibilities. Just to quickly name some of the other speakers that are going, we have Dr. Nigel Eccles. Nigel, again, I know you know Nigel, Clive. Nigel's a breast cancer specialist, so he's going to tell us how to test for breast cancer, the right methods, which is not a mammogram. So you'll learn about how to do it. It's a heat using a camera that takes the heat of the tissues, and also how to avoid it, and how to get through menopause without triggering a breast cancer. So that, for the ladies, is obviously going to be a very interesting lecture. We also have Dr. Dorian Dugmore coming. Dorian is an expert in the sports field, but he also specializes in cardiovascular health. And he has the most amazing things to show us about what should be very fit and healthy people, i.e. footballers, cricketers, tennis players, and their coaches and managers. And you're going to see what happens to them when they put themselves under extreme stress, which could be very high level exercise, right? Or it could be, when the managers are shouting and screaming at the sidelines for the guys to be doing better. So he's going to show us the changes that take place in those guys and how he has found ways to make sure that they can, because they're not going to, if you want to be a Wimbledon champion, you're going to have to do what you're going to have to do. Strangely enough, that takes me back to what Professor Cavenson told me once about the Olympic gold medal winners in London, who were the gymnasts. And these are girls in their young, early 20s, very fit, top of their game. And they were shocked when they measured their telomeres to find they had such short telomeres, they were equivalent to the average 40-year-old. So, if you looked at this person, you go, wow, young girl, super fit, unbelievable. And yet, internally, has got something rather serious going on. Thankfully, in their cases, the peptides, they made them recover very quickly. I mean, we're talking weeks in their cases. So that's where the peptide, because it induces protein synthesis. So you get much faster recovery rates. So Dorian, Dr. Dorian Dugmore, he's going to be talking that. Dorian also looks after a lot of corporate boards and things like that. So it'd be an interesting insight, because these aren't unwell people. They're not medically sick, but they've got issues. So how do we overcome those issues? We also got Dr. Aubrey de Grey coming, very famous is Aubrey. He's the scientific officer for SENS, very outspoken on longevity. So he's going to be coming along to tell us what the state of play is at the moment. How far are we to controlling biological age and degenerative diseases? So it'd be interesting to hear, because he's a man obviously that travels the world going to the latest research things. So that will be very interesting too. So I think I've got everybody in the 10. I hope I haven't missed anybody in that list. Plus, we've got several companies exhibiting very interesting things that they do. And most important of all, it's about everybody there. We want everybody together at breakfast, everybody together in the refreshments, everybody together at the lunch, everybody together at the dinner. And also on the Sunday morning, so that's a Saturday. And on the Sunday morning, the whole morning is questions and answers. So the speakers are up there on stage. You can ask them any questions. I might even try and get the speakers to talk amongst themselves, and everybody listen in. I think that would be quite interesting. And so we've got a dedicated morning for Q&A. And then in the afternoon, you can do whatever you want. Luton Who has a swimming pool, a gymnasium, 1,000 acres of grounds, a golf course, bicycles for rent, you know, go and enjoy the afternoon.
So for those who couldn't get to it, are you doing a live stream?
Not a live stream, unfortunately, but we are doing a recording. So we will offer access to the recordings after. Can't be 100% certain at the moment how quickly that will be. But what I would recommend anybody, if you go to the Profound Health website, so that's profound-health-summit.com, if you go there, send us an email just saying I'm interested in the video recordings afterwards, and we'll make sure we keep you notified when they become available. Of course, tickets are still for sale. They're still available. We're still offering a £50 discount up until the 1st of August, and then prices go up again. So that's £350. But bear in mind, you're getting 2 dinners, a lunch, all refreshments, and it's very high. It's 5-star all the way. It's very high quality. And then, of course, the prices go up again on the 1st of September. So they go up to the full price of £450. But if you act now, it's £350, all inclusive.
Bargain.
Thank you. Well, I don't want
it
to.
Is. I mean, even for one of those factors.
Thank you, Clive. People don't recognize it, but if anyone's got a pen and paper, just work out what it costs to bring 10 speakers in from different parts of the world, put them up in a nice hotel for 3 or 4 nights, work the cost of that out, and then go to a hotel like Luton Who and say, how much can we hire your rooms for? And how much, if we can feed 100, 150 people, 3-course meal with a glass of wine and blah, 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 you know, you'd be shocked. And then we have to get things like insurance. Plus, I'm giving my staff for free that are helping to manage this and to be there on the day to help people, you know, get the most out of the meeting. So unfortunately, I think we all know how much everything costs these days, right? You know, even the cost of the gasoline to to drive there. So we are subsidized. Believe it or not, these tickets are heavily subsidized.
I can well believe it. I mean, when you did the one in Kensington some years back, I mean, that was really interesting, not just because of the speakers, but for the first time I was able to try out a hyperbaric chamber, and there was lots of interesting things to do.
We've got some very interesting companies exhibiting. Funnily enough, there will be a hyperbaric oxygen chamber there. So you'll be able to try that. Also, Dr. Robert Troussell's there with his gadgets. I think you had one of those, OnDemed, was it OnDemed? I think. We're also showing a gadget called the Age Scan, which is a measurement in skin. Very simple. It looks like a little photocopier, to be honest. You put your arm on it and it passes an infrared beam through you, and it can show you very quickly how many glycated proteins are in your skin. And of course, if you're fairly high, then you're at risk of diabetes, you're at risk of heart disease and hardened arteries and, you know, all sorts of things, cataracts as eye problems. So it's just a little indicator, non-invasive, you know, things like that. We've got laboratories there who are showing the tests that they can do, including telomeres and DNA methylation. And things are a lot easier in that department now, because now you can buy a little kit, you can take it home, you can do your, you know, a finger prick and put a spot of blood on the little tray, and then put that in the little compartment, and then mail that to the lab, and then the lab will email you your results. So things, you know, that's nice to keep, and it's a cheaper way of doing things. So we've also got people doing collagen peptides. We've got people obviously offering the oral peptides and other nutritional products, of course. My own magazine will be there, the Aging Matters magazine. So anyone who wants to sign up, and there'll be free copies, of course, to take away.
Great magazine, really good.
Yeah. And so there's going to be quite a few. I was just trying to think of who else. There's quite a few other people. I don't hope we miss anybody out. Yeah, it's not a huge event. I'm not going to say don't go there thinking there's going to be 1,000 people and 300 exhibitors. It won't be like that. But we've designed it like that because we want it to be intimate. We want people to learn. We want people to network. So dare I say this, we've gone for quality and not quantity. That's been our goal from day one.
Yeah, and I can vouch for that. The ones, you know. So thank you so much, Phil. I think everybody interested who's able to come, I think, will come.
Sorry, Clive, to interrupt. Perhaps just one thing to mention. I mean, a lot of our British viewers will know where Luton is. Some of our people from further afield may not know where Luton is. Obviously, look it up on Google. But basically, it's very easy to get to Luton. Luton Airport is a 5-minute cab drive away from the hotel, and it's the place where Ryanair and EasyJet fly to, so you get nice cheap flights all across Europe to Luton. Luton Airport is also served by a brand new state-of-the-art railway station called Luton Parkway. So, and again, 5-minute cab drive away from Luton Hoo. And also, if anyone's driving, then it's just about 10 minutes off junction 10 of the M1. So that's, and if any of our foreign guests are flying to Heathrow or somewhere like that, then it's about a 40-minute train or cab drive from there. So we're not, it is outside London, but it's not that far outside London.
I think they cheekily call Luton Airport London or something. It's
it's the Luton is also London Stansted and all the rest of it. Yeah.
But it's great. I've never been to Luton Hoo, and I've heard people say very good things about it as a place to go. So I'm quite looking forward. I'm looking forward to the whole thing.
Look it up on the old YouTube, and the nice, beautiful grounds, 1,000 acres of woodland and parkland around it, a lake, all sorts of things there. We've actually got a private area called the Weir. It's next to the Weir. So they put wedding functions on, and in this case our meeting. And the main house, the stately home itself, Luton Hoo itself, masses of history there. You know, Winston Churchill spent lots of time there, and if you've watched a lot of films, you've probably seen Luton Hoo. For example, 4 Weddings and a Funeral, Luton Hoo. So yeah, it's a very impressive place. Very high quality, and as I say, there's a lot, you know, there's a spa, there's a swimming pool, there's a golf course, there's a lot of different things you can do there. I do honestly believe that we have got an outstanding bunch of people with some outstanding things to say.
Sure.
You know, and it's not just for people to come and learn, and because if you haven't got a knee problem, you might say, well, I don't care. You know, I haven't got a knee problem. But I always look at it like this. But you've probably got someone in the family who probably has. But also, don't you want to retain that just in case 5 years or 10 years or 20 years? That, and also, I hope to get health professional people there so they can understand that they can incorporate some of these things into their practices and be at the cutting edge, give their patients an advantage, and give the reason why they should visit them.
Quite.
Not the guy down the road.
Quite so. Except I don't think doctors work anymore, do they?
It's the mainstream guy. I'm not. Do you know what? I keep hearing from doctors that say I'm not going to work in the NHS anymore.